on the News Channel 5 network. This is OpenLine.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to OpenLine, talking about a big issue that the council will be taking on in the coming months. And what we can do on this show, which I appreciate, we can kind of delve into it, dive into it, and really examine it. And so we're going to talk about, should Nashville be having a contract? Should Nashville have a contract with a private prison company? We have with us Metro Council member Freddie O'Connell. He represents downtown, the urban core. That's where the current sheriff's office is, the new facility. Mm-hmm. And the bottom line is this: the Metro Council is preparing to reevaluate its contract with private prison operator CoreCivic. Mm-hmm. And this contract expires in January of next year. So what do you think we should be doing?
So it's really interesting, Ben, because Council wouldn't be considering this if it weren't for a bill I passed a few years ago, which actually specifically gave Council the opportunity to review exactly this contract in these scenarios with correctional facilities. It also introduced some new reporting requirements, so I continued exploring what it was going to mean. Frankly, just partly because of what we discovered in doing this report. So after that bill, I basically I talked to Sheriff Hall and the Davidson County Sheriff's Office, and let me just say this: they were great collaborators. I think they approached this with some curiosity and clearly came up with an in-depth report here at my request, right? So this is something I asked the Davidson County Sheriff's Office to do, knowing that we had this contract expiration coming up. I don't think we're in a position, based on these numbers, to say all of a sudden in January, hey, let's make a sudden and swift change. I think more likely what's going to happen is that we will go back into some period of contract renewal with CoreCivic or whoever fulfills the RFP, because we're doing that in preparation for that expiration. And in that period of 3 years or however many years after that, we'll use the information from this report to say, between the mayor's office and their process of recommending a budget, between council's budget and finance committee, and I think as the community conversation picks up, do we as a city want to make our own choice here about whether any inmates, whether in jail or in prison, are in a privately operated facility?
And do you come at this from the perspective of, you want to move us away from having inmates in a privately operated facility?
Right. I think from my perspective, coming into a role in public service, knowing, for instance, that we have a Davidson County Sheriff's Office, and I know there have been at times critics, including things related to immigration policy, but I think also a lot of people looking to offer some praise for things where Sheriff Hall, for instance, is now at the vanguard of people operating jails that are looking to do more. They've got a behavioral care center that's coming online in the next few months that is going to completely change what their downtown complex is. It is not just going to be a detention facility. It's going to have basically a mental health unit. And if you qualify, if you're eligible, you're going to be completely diverted from the booking and jailing process and actually getting the services that are probably going to keep you from just rotating through the criminal justice system, picking up new costs, getting into a deeper hole, and going out and committing another crime. Instead, you're going to be diverted into a process that actually gives you the treatment you need. So we've got that entire operation here locally, and so I wanted to explore, could we do this in a publicly operated way, because the Davidson County Sheriff's Office is beholden to voters and taxpayers. CoreCivic, or any private prison operator, is beholden to their shareholders. I think there is a fundamental moral problem when you turn prison beds, particularly knowing what we know now in an era of mass incarceration, into profit centers.
And so we just had a mayor's race. We've had a few mayor's races. I don't remember this being a big issue. We have a lot of big issues, and so where do you, people almost are overwhelmed with the number of big issues. Where does this rank, do you think, as far as big issues we should be tackling right now?
You know, I think we're a big city, right, on the one hand, so that comes with additional complexity. So we went from, if you remember, the Mayor Dean mantra from years ago was public safety, public education, and economic development, right? And I think what we've done is we've kind of added affordable housing and transit to that mix. But then we also have this other collection of issues out here. I mean, under housing, you get into the complications of things like homelessness. When you're dealing with public safety, to me, that's actually the full realm of things that are related to criminal justice, right? And criminal justice has its own set of ties to poverty, right? And we've looked at Nashville's poverty rate. We've looked at how that is, in some cases, connected to crime, to homelessness, to housing, to challenges in workforce development. I was just at a gathering of the hospitality industry yesterday, and one of their greatest challenges right now, even as Nashville's tourism economy is booming, is just getting the workforce to operate hotels, restaurants, bars, the establishments that people are coming to participate in, partly because affordable housing is such a challenge. To me, I don't necessarily say this issue outweighs these other 5 major issues that we're working on as a city, but I also think as a big city, as a top 25 American city, Nashville has to be, in a little bit of a posture of being able to walk and chew gum and do some other things, right? Like probably beyond just walking and chewing gum.
And you have said, all right, so the contract expires January of next year.
Right.
It's going to be reviewed, but you, based on this report, which is a big report, you don't see us changing in January because it's expensive, right?
No, and the truth of the matter is, right, they provide a pretty good summary of both the startup costs, because the year 1 costs are a little different, because and let me back up for a second too and just explain. The facility that I'm talking about is for locally sentenced state inmates. It is technically, the contract isn't actually with Metro Council per se. It is a bizarre pass-through from the Tennessee Department of Corrections through the Davidson County Sheriff's Office and then ultimately to CoreCivic. And in light of that, there is this bizarre angle where what we'd be doing is saying, okay, the state prison operation does not have interest in doing this. I've had a preliminary conversation with some folks from the Davidson County delegation to the General Assembly to look at this, and I think a next question might be to confirm, to validate, because my expectation is we go out to contract, TDOC's not going to step in and say, hey guys, don't worry about the contract. We're going to come in and we're going to operate this as a publicly operated prison. So the exercise here was to say, could our local jailer actually do this? And let me also say, Sheriff Hall is not coming at me saying, let me do this. He's responding to my request, going through this and saying, here's what we know it would cost. Also, we could do this. I mean, he's got confidence in his operation, he knows, but he also knows he's not going to put this on the table for us to consider without the mayor and without the council saying, we want you to go do this.
This is the Metro Detention Facility. That's what it's called.
That's what it's called.
A prison next to the county jail.
So I can go ahead and guarantee you when we go back out to contract, it will no longer be called the Metro Detention Facility. That's one thing that the sheriff and I fundamentally agree on, that this is an incorrectly named facility.
And why is it incorrectly named? Because that makes it sound, it's
right,
Metro.
because it isn't a Metro, it's on state land, it's actually a function of the state, and those are state inmates. Mm-hmm. So these are not people that are pre-trial in a Davidson County Sheriff's Office detention facility. They are convicted felons.
These are convicted felons serving 1 to 6 year terms.
Correct.
And they are, it's TDOC, right? So these are prisoners.
Yes.
And so the state could come in and take it over.
Right, and they could do a couple things. They could come in and operate it themselves as a publicly operated facility. They could also say, okay, you guys don't want a contract. We're going to shut down this facility and we're going to disperse these prisoners to other TDOC-operated facilities elsewhere in the state. That would have complications, probably disadvantages for those inmates, because they would then be very likely removed from attorneys, family, etc., right? It would not be necessarily a good outcome for anybody who's an inmate there right now.
And what is the most interesting thing you found as you kind of looked through all of this? Is it the reimbursement rate?
Yes. So
this is important. Okay, the reimbursement.
This is the craziest part, right? Because ostensibly the reason that you have a private operator in the first place is efficiency, right? It's a cost-saving thing. Well, okay, then why is CoreCivic enjoying a reimbursement rate on a per diem basis? They get reimbursed for the people that are in their beds, and they are reimbursed at a rate currently of $61.87 per day per inmate. Counties across the state of Tennessee, all 95 counties, don't have that arrangement. They get reimbursed at the rate of $37 per day for any such facilities that exist there. So why, if we're making an efficiency argument, does CoreCivic need almost twice as much in a per diem to operate this facility? Right.
So if we gave this to the sheriff, he would get much less per inmate.
We don't know that yet. It's possible that if we said as a city, what we're proposing is the Davidson County Sheriff's Office will effectively fulfill the RFP. That they're going to go in and operate this. Can we negotiate that same reimbursement rate for DCSO that CoreCivic has enjoyed? They might say yes, they might say no. I think a lot of the information in this report is assuming that the state would say no to that.
Because every other sheriff is getting that amount.
Correct.
But that is interesting.
It's fascinating.
Why give CoreCivic such a larger number?
I suspect
what is it, 61?
It's almost $62 a day right now.
$62 a day per inmate, and county sheriffs get $37 a day.
I mean, if I'm being at my most cynical, I would say because CoreCivic has very good lobbyists.
And so, again, what would it mean if we were to get out of this? If we no longer use CoreCivic, what does it mean?
So it basically means then we put what I think is a public function, right? The incarceration of people that we have agreed as a society, as Nashvillians, as Tennesseans, need to serve time, ideally for the purpose of being rehabilitated if these folks are not our most dangerous maximum security type folks, that there's a reentry process that will occur sometime between that 1 and 6 year period, that public, I guess you'd say, service of incarceration is something that is better left with the incentives to be in the public for saying we want these people not to be recidivist. We don't want them to come back here. We want them to be rehabilitated. We want them to participate fully in society, rather than to align that incentive to say, how do we fill more beds? How do we get this per diem rate up even higher? How do we increase our margins, right? So to me, the fundamental choice is, do we put this entire concept of incarceration back into a public place where the incentives are aligned with what is in the public interest versus, and I think this is peculiar. I wouldn't make this argument about every other thing across the board in the universe of what could be public-private, what could be outsourced, but I think there is a unique problem with incentivizing incarceration through private operations.
This is born from your fundamental disagreement with that.
Right, and I think even if you're making an efficiency of government argument, this is not the place to be making it, because at the end of the day, you're still saying, well, I've got an empty bed here. There probably ought to be somebody in that bed if I'm going to hit my revenue target.
And so this big report, what was the bottom line? And you're saying, again, it probably won't happen that in January CoreCivic would go away and Metro Sheriff's Department would take it over. What would it cost us? If they did it, what are we talking about here?
So again, some of it depends on the per diem. It's going to range, like the floor of it would range up to, in the tens of millions of dollars, right? So somewhere between $18 to $30 million as a year one cost, and similar, or I think it gets up to 35, 36, and then it kind of falls off because you have startup costs, because all the equipment out there, kitchen stuff, frying pans, refrigerators, towels, those things are all owned by CoreCivic, a private entity right now. So assuming that they're not going to just give us those items, that we'd either buy them secondhand or go back out and replace them, there is a startup cost in year one, and then that startup cost falls. But it's still, this is a conversation about, do we as Nashvillians want to go down this road where we say our county jailer is actually going to now also operate the prison, and we're going to make this investment because it's going to bust a little bit of the method efficiency piece, because we know the per diem piece is kind of over here on its own as a curious part of this. But this isn't necessarily going to be cheaper, because every one of those private employees will become a public employee. They will very likely enjoy higher wages, better benefits, right? Which again, as a city, we get to make that choice.
And at a time when we're looking, I mean, you talk about money this year.
Right.
Our budget has some problems.
Right.
We have some concerns.
And again, that let me underline, that's why I don't think this is happening in FY20, right?
And can we do it even the next year? I mean, do we have the money to do this anytime soon?
No, I think that's why my expectation is that I tried to approach this as responsibly as I could. Let's understand this first before we say we are doing this thing, right? Let's understand what our costs are. Let's understand what Davidson County Sheriff's Office capabilities are. Let's understand what that relationship with the state would look like in these circumstances. And let's set ourselves up to have a responsible conversation about this.
All right, let's, okay, I want to take calls, but I have to go to a break. So okay. Bill and Taylor, hold on. I'll get to your call. If you want to call in, there's the number 615-737-PLUS, 615-737-7587. Take a break, be back right after this.